Hello, Dylan. So, welcome to the Sacred Surf Shack podcast. Awesome to have you here today. Had a fair few requests to get you on the podcast, and I feel like we have a bit of an alignment with wanting to work with the youth and supporting them, and I guess reaching a place of healthy masculinity or stable masculinity, or however you want to word it, because it's a bit trending, and not even just trending is like we were chatting before. Is like there's a crisis, there's a there's a toxicity around it, which I don't like to use that word because
Mm.
it's not, it's quite abrasive and harsh, that sort of word. So um, I thought we could start by, just if you just share a little about yourself and what you do and go from there.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, mate. I love the name Sacred Surf Shack. How did you come up with that name? Where was it born from?
Well, I love surfing. So that
Yep.
was it. And I guess for me, my journey around the sacred and spiritual, and it kind of
Love
just
that.
dropped in the
Mm.
meditation. But I didn't know what I was going to use it for. So I didn't
Yeah.
know it was going to be for a podcast. It just kind of
Ah,
like,
cool.
so I paint surfboards for fun
Yeah.
and kind of just dropped in while I was painting a surfboard and meditating. And yeah, and then I was like, fuck, what do I do with that name? And then I realized,
Yeah,
podcast.
the podcast. Yeah, that's actually really funny. I had something really similar happening to me with Prince to King. It's actually funny you say that. So that's and I'll lead into what I do, which is my Prince to King mentoring. But I had a similar experience actually where I was meditating and that came through and it was like Prince to King. I was like, that's fucking epic. And then I was like, what is it? Coaching program from, oh, cool. And then I
Yeah.
developed it out from that. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's the work that I do. So I mentor young men. Um, you know, pretty much I call myself a masculinity coach because that's really the basis and the foundation that I set my work in is like, great, I'm working with young boys, young princes that I'm helping empower them to step into their healthy masculinity, step into their healthy, clean king energy. And I've been doing that for about almost 2 years now, full time, and absolutely loving this work. I'm so grateful to clients I get to impact, the clients I get to work with, and really stems from two big events in my life, like or two or three big events in my life. But number one, leaving high school, I grew up playing a lot of sport, and I always just thought I'll probably do something in sport, probably play sport. I was pretty high level basketball and AFL in Sydney, and then the draft age in Australia is 18. So then you finish high school, you don't get drafted, and there I was 18 years old going, what the hell am I going to do with my life? I've never really given it any proper thought. The answer was just always, well, some kind of sport. I'll do something in sport. And so being lost from, 18 to, I would say lost from 18 to 22 and then 22 to 25 down different paths, like at least with a bit of direction and a bit of purpose, but just not the right paths. And so that really drives my work of like wanting to support, help, guide, empower these young men to be able to make these decisions and just have the conversations that, you know, I wasn't having, the conversations that most men aren't having, or most young men aren't having. And so that really drives my work. And then also a couple experiences of just, deep pain, deep heartbreak. My patterning in my journey was really around the feminine and around my relationship with women. And that's where a lot of my pain stemmed from, through breakups and heartbreak and getting cheated on and then cheating on my partners. And so, that led me, one specific breakup back in 2015 led me down just a just a bad path, or a dark path that led me to a pretty bad depression and anxiety where I didn't get out of bed for a week. And that was my wake up call at 20 years old to go, okay, I need some help now. Okay, I need some support. And putting my hand up and going to see a psychologist, being diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and then saying, okay, I'm aware of a problem. I can fix it, because now that I'm aware of something, great, I can address it and make the necessary adjustments. And that was, my journey into eventually coaching.
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. And you've made some powerful points that we can piggyback
Mm,
off. So it sounds like you had quite an epic journey, and especially like the one point that I want to touch on, which I think a lot of youth get lost at, and me and you both did as well, is like you finish school and you don't know where you're going. You kind of
mm,
had this idea. Some of us had an idea, some of us didn't, and you kind of hit 18. You're like, fuck, what am I doing? I think if you go back to the tribal days, and even still now, they get initiated to like more of like a soul initiation, and it's not. We don't have that in our society, or Western society. So I know for me, is like when I hit 18, I didn't know what I was doing. It was just kind of like drugs, alcohol, and then I went to the military. I had to fix myself. That wasn't the best of decisions, but I can see the gold in it now. But it was a wrong path as well, and it led me to a deep depression and suicide and all sorts of stuff. And these are the sort of things that you've touched on, that any man can face. And it's no man is going to not face some form of, and like we were talking at the start, is pain, and then there's suffering. And we were talking about how you can choose suffering. So maybe we could chat about the sort of key moment of like between 18 and 23 is quite a powerful sort of time at that age to go explore yourself.
Definitely.
And maybe we could talk about, so I'll ask you, like, what's your thoughts on that? And then as well as we'll go into healthy masculinity and what your perception is of it at this time.
Yeah. Well, I think the greatest gap in the market for young men, or gap in their development, is that rites of initiation. That it has to be the biggest thing, because we're no longer taking boys and saying, here, go through this trial, this ring of fire, and come out and you're now a man. We have these pseudo rituals, these kind of like, okay, you can drive at 16 with your parents. Okay, you can drive at 18 alone. Okay, you can drink at 18 and you can vote. But there's no trial. There's no, like real, like when, and I'll ask you, like, when did you feel like the man or a man?
Yeah, well, it's just funny when you're saying that. There is no trial, is there? Like, it's back in the old days. It's like, here's a spear, there's a cave, there's a lion in there. I'll see you if you come out, and then you're a man. We don't have that.
Exactly.
Go and drive your car. Like, there's a lot of pseudo initiations. And for me personally, like, I don't feel like I became a man until I became a father. That was probably it. Like, I've been in the military, so I was around military men, but most of them are just boys masquerading as men. Most of them. And then
100%.
And I landed myself in prison for a year, and like the same thing, boys masquerading as men.
Yeah.
And it was almost like when I got out, so that was my initiation, was prison. It was almost like that. And then coming out and knowing I'm just going to become a father was when I started to really step up and to burn away these sort of boyish tendencies and boyish qualities. That was kind of my initiation. And then what we're touching on the start is finding the right mentor, finding the right support is so imperative. I can't do it alone. I don't feel like we can do it alone.
No. And we never used to. Like, again, we used to have the elders of the tribe. We used to have the men around us, and they were men that you knew. If you needed something, you'd walk 20 meters down the road and go and get something or get some advice. And so our tribe and our community was so important to our development as young women, but as young men, to what we're talking to. And so we've removed ourselves from that, and we've really pushed this idea of independence being the most important thing. And as I'm about to start my fatherhood journey with my son that's on the way, and I'm thinking about, okay, well, what are the important things I want to impart onto him? And I would say 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when I thought about being a father, it's like, man, I want an independent son. Now I look at it and I go, you know what? It's really not the important thing that I'm trying to impart on my son. I'm not trying to impart independence. I'm trying to impart, hey, you've got this support network. Hey, here are healthy ideas around masculinity. Here's what it means to be a man. What do you think it means to be a man? How do you want to show up? And empowering him to be independent, but not through preaching independence and pushing independence, but rather through empowering him with knowledge and support. And then you prop someone up, and you do that enough and you do that well enough, eventually a byproduct of that is they become independent. But I think
Yeah.
we've made independence the goal and the process. Like, okay, how do I make him more independent? Well, I'm going to make him take the bus every day to school, and so it becomes a process rather than like, I'm just going to support you and I'm going to do all these things that really empower you to be independent, make good decisions, be smart in your risk taking. And then as a result of that, oh, look at him. He is now independent, but the process wasn't about independence. The process was about all these other little things. And so I think that push has made us very like insulated in our family units. Like even the fact that it's like you're 18, move out of home and go and rent. It's like, okay, where's that? Even just like where's that money going? You're now paying off someone else's mortgage. Like, why not stay home in your support network? Develop your independence through this support system and then step out into the world. Or potentially what I tell my clients is I say, go and live out of home for 6 months, 12 months, but then don't be afraid to come back, go and learn what it's like to live on your own, fend for yourself. But then once you've got those lessons, like, man, don't be afraid to come back and utilize your support network to then reach proper layers of independence. And so I again, coming back to your question around where, what's going on with the youth, it's like that there's no initiation. I was similar to you. Like I had a really powerful experience last year and it was a ritual experience where I was I was doing plant medicine and I had this calling with like, okay, I was thinking about my son and I wasn't expecting at that time, but I was just thinking like about my work and I can't wait. I was having these visions of like me and my son and me taking my son into manhood and then I was like in that moment, fuck, I don't have that myself. I've never initiated myself. And so I had this really beautiful moment where I took myself into the river and I dunked myself down 3 times. And it was like this, you're stepping out of this river, you're stepping out of this place and you are a man now, and coming out of that and separating myself there. And then through my journey into fatherhood with my partner being pregnant, so many lessons and so much of the journey for me has been stepping into my manhood, into being a supportive partner, into really healthy levels of masculinity and burning away all the boy shit that I had. And I tell people all the time, they're like, how's it going? All right. And I'm like, man, I lived 27 years of my life as a boy. Like I was a boy before this, and people are really surprised, like, oh, wow, like that you would admit that. And I'm like, well, yeah, like it's fucking true. Like I look at my life, I had no responsibilities. I was sleeping around. I was doing all these things that was just childish and boyish and what the boy looks up to. And so that's been my transition, is like into manhood rather than fatherhood. And fatherhood's going to come, of course, when my son does arrive at Earthside and I do step into the father role. But so much has been like going from boy to man and really realizing like, fuck, I was a boy,
Yeah. It's confronting, man. Like I remember when
It
I realized,
is.
I was like, fuck, I'm still a boy. And I was 29 when my big addiction was pot. And I was like, realized how much it would just activate all the boy qualities, video games, like porn, all that shit. And it was
And those
confronting.
bad habits group together, right?
Yeah,
Like
they do.
they
Yeah.
group together. You do one thing, and then all of a sudden, like I'm similar. My partner will call me out, and I love it. And it's been that it's been the burning. It's such a burning away process and like a dying off process. And so, like one thing was like getting rid of my PlayStation was big. Like This is no longer serving me, and it's no longer serving where I'm going. And so removing that, and that was a difficult process of like, oh, like there's 15, a solid 15 years. And people are like, man, it's just a PlayStation. And I'm like, and I laugh at it too. And I'm like, yeah, that's funny. But what does it represent? It represents the death of the boy, or at least part of the death of the boy. And that's big. And that's a big process. And so that was big. And then, when I do like drink, or, if I smoke weed and my partner witnesses what happens when I go through that, it's like I get the cartoons on and I get my ice cream and I huddle up, and it's like, then she loses trust in me. She's like, where'd my man go? Like, that's not a man, that's a boy. And so again, it's like, okay, getting rid of that and removing these things from my life that no longer serve me so that I can step into manhood.
Powerful. And I love how it's funny, like like, you know, I don't like to say our women because we don't own them, and a lot of people slam me for saying things like that. But my queen,
Mm,
she does. She pulls me up, and I ask her. I'm like, you need to call me out. Like, call me out if I'm being like not a man. And she does
mm,
that, and it's great because we need that. It's like you've got the king and the queen. I think there's that photo, or that ancient Egyptian photo, where the queen's kind of holding the king or something.
mm.
It's like an old sort of Egyptian thing, and it's almost like, you know, they even look at it. The queen. You look at any sort of TV show, Vikings, and queen's always the one that's in the king's ear,
Yeah,
guiding the king,
giving guidance.
guiding,
Yep.
supporting. Oh yeah, I love you, and supporting that. It's just like there's a deep honoring we need to have for our queens and women in our life. But if we're not safe, trustworthy,
Mm,
and doing man shit, and that doesn't mean you can't. Like, I love anime because I can see the
yeah.
deep archetypal like stuff behind it through the creativity.
Mm,
But before it
yeah.
was, I couldn't see that. It was just like
Yeah.
cartoons, and now I see such a deeper level to these sorts of things. But it's getting lost in that. And I guess how I look at it is, are you a slave to it, or is it serving you?
Mm.
And that's when you can start to use things still, because, you know, like we can go down the whole monk path and just be completely celibate of everything.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a journey. That's not a path that's
Mm.
sustainable in the West, I don't think.
Mm. No,
Um,
definitely not. And I like there's a quote that I love. I don't know where it's from, or even if I'm interpreting the meaning correctly, but I'm pretty sure I am. It's like the man is the head, but the man is the head of the household, but the woman is the neck. And
ooh,
the woman can turn the head any direction she wants, right?
mm,
Like that's and I without getting cancelled, but I really think that the feminist movement did a disservice to women by peddling a real victim mentality for women. And when I look back and I look at my partner embodying this role of growing a child and the strength she needs to do that, and like the power women have and the power that women have, I loved your example, like the Vikings, like the queen, like women held a lot of reverence in traditional cultures, but even just through history, women were very much revered. And you can look through the past and look at it through a lens of like, what was all the things wrong with the past? Because yes, there were things wrong, and we have progressed from a place that was not great for all people to a much better place for all people. And so that's kind of, I choose to look at it through that, and talking to my partner who's, who is a very big feminist, and we have amazing discussions and debates, and we challenge each other, and it gets heated sometimes, and we need to like walk away, but always coming back to love. But that's one thing that I'm so passionate about, is like, women, you are powerful. Like you have this amazing energy about you that, and I'm reading at the moment Way of the Superior Man, which I'm
mm.
sure, have you read
Yeah, I haven't read
David
it
Dita's
fully,
book?
but I've got the book, and
Yeah, I'm
read
finally
chapters.
getting around to reading it, and I'm almost
Yeah.
done. And like the role like of masculine and the feminine is so complementary. It's so like it's so beautiful, and the way that he writes about it's great. Like when I'm stressed out at work and when I'm in my purpose in doing these things, one, my partner looks to me and goes, great, I can trust him and I can surrender into him that he's purpose driven. But two, when I'm stressed out and I'm fucking going at it and like things are tough, I am looking to my partner for support. I'm looking to her feminine nature, to her radiance, for her to give me life force, because that's what the feminine, it's like gives me. And then great, there's the life force that I needed to get through my 14-hour workday and come back and be okay in that. And
Yeah,
really, so I'm really loving that dynamic at the moment between the masculine and the feminine in my own life and in my own relationship.
that was beautifully said. Just like, it's funny that you were saying that about the women being so powerful, and I was reflecting in the shower. It's like, you know, and you've got these men that hate women, and you've got women that hate women, and you've got
Mm,
like this victim mentality around feminist movement, and that's just gone so pear shaped. And I'm totally
mm,
on board with your perspective, and I
mm,
kind of, because I've got two little girls and a powerful woman, and the way I look at it is they're gifted and blessed to give life, to birth life, to
mm,
grow life.
mm,
They are the bridge between the spiritual and the physical. they bring souls through, and it's just like you look at it like me and you wouldn't be having this conversation today if our mothers didn't have the strength, the courage, the fearlessness to birth us
Amen.
and look after us. And then like I have a deep reverence for women, and most of my mentors have been women. All my therapists have been women, and I have masculine mentors as well. But some of the most powerful experiences I've had have actually been with women holding space for me in my shit. And it's just incredible. Like if the women knew their power, if the women knew their power they could have with a solid man, stable, healthy man that has good values, good virtues, like looks at life from a place of loving kindness, we would have, we all know, we'd have, the life would be looking way different.
Yeah. Well, I think, I really resonate with what you said, and the cliche saying of, weak men create tough times. It's not just true on a bigger leadership like government and institution scale, but even just in the family unit. I think back to strong male role models for daughters and for sons. It's like it's a very fucking important role to be that father figure. You fuck that up and your daughters grow up with daddy issues. You fuck that up and your son grows up to be a poor representation of what it means to be a man. And the pain that we have, that we inflict on each other, really comes down to like, how solid was your dad in that family unit? Like, was he a solid role model? Was he there for you? Was he heart, like connected to his heart and resilient? Like that, I talk about that a lot with my boys. You can be both. You can be heart and backbone, and it's so important. And so you look at it through that lens and you start to kind of have that perspective, and you go, wow, like men working on themselves and is so fucking important. It's so crucial. To themselves, to everyone around them. It's so crucial that you're owning your shit, taking responsibility, and not coming at it from like, oh yeah, but my upbringing was really tough. It's like, yeah, man, it was. But what the fuck are you going to do about it? Like, are you just going to sit there and outsource your own power to other people? Or are you going to take responsibility now that you are a man, now that you are 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and you're going to take responsibility and say, yeah, man, that was tough and that wasn't my fault, but now it's my responsibility to heal. And now it's my responsibility to own my stuff so that I don't, bleed on other people that didn't cut me. And that's really powerful when you take responsibility for your life and you show up in a place of, hey, yes, I've made mistakes. Yes, I had poor circumstances. Yes, things happened to me that were outside of my control. But what am I going to do about it? I have every right to sit here and bitch and moan, and like people will pat you on the back and be like, oh man, life is hard. But where's that going to lead you? It's just going to lead you down a life of being a victim, and you're going to be miserable versus taking responsibility and going down that path of empowering yourself to heal whatever it is that you need to heal, and take responsibility and lead yourself, your family unit, your community, whatever it looks like to the individual. It's so important. It's so, so important, because we have such a big responsibility as men, as protectors and providers, to take care of our communities. And what I've seen play out over the last, I'm 28 years old, so I'll say in the last 20 years, but I know it expanded longer than that, was this attack on masculinity. You mentioned you don't like using the term toxic masculinity. I never use that term, because what am I meant to do with toxic parts of myself?
Exactly.
Like, what do you do with toxicity? You have to like, put on a fucking suit, and you have to be really careful, and like you can't touch it and you can't destroy it. It's there, and you have to dump it somewhere. It's like, there's nothing in me that's that. And there's nothing in anyone that's that. It's, there's an unhealed masculine man, or I like what you said, because I also talk about that too. There's a boy in a man's body, right? And when we look at it through empathy and we go, oh man, there's just a kid who's really hurting. Sure, he might be 40 or 50, but how can I connect with the inner child of that guy and say, fuck, man, you're just in pain. How can I help you? How can I heal whatever it is that's going on? Or you're going to heal it, but how can I help you heal it? And then through that way, we come together and we move towards the outcome that we all should be wanting, which is like a greater society, or, you know, a more empathetic society, or whatever the outcome is. But that's what we need to look at. And when I see the term toxic masculinity thrown around, you're not getting any closer to the end goal, which is some form of helping men, some form of helping society, some form of like it. That doesn't take you closer. What you're just doing is shaming the man and aspects of himself, and also probably driving him out of the conversation, which is like, oh, I don't like that term, so I'm now checking out from whatever you have to say. Which what, like, people can make the argument like, well, he just needs to come to terms with that's an okay term. And it's like, wouldn't you rather just use a term he's okay with, drop his defenses, and then allow him to step into the conversation and take responsibility and do the healing? Isn't that an easier path, just by changing one word from, and I use the word unhealed or wounded masculinity. Then you bring him to the conversation. Oh, you're wounded. Okay, we can heal that. Oh, you're toxic. The fuck am I meant to do with toxic? You know?
Yeah. And that's the powerful distinction you made there. Like when you reframe the word and the defenses come down, because shame is attached to toxicity and humiliation. So if I'm toxic, then there can be a shame and humiliation, and you don't want to face it, you don't want to heal it. And it's not people like myself and you that heal others. We hold a space for healing to happen. And like you were saying about the boy, there's a hurt boy, a hurt wounded boy who's stuck in psychological time, caught in psychological time, frozen from fucking 8 years old. He might be 40, playing out this same pattern the last 32 years. And he's just hurting. And but then in that, like you've touched on, is that starts to hurt everyone around them, to ripple outward. And the man, like how I kind of see the masculine presence of the man, is like you've got like, they're like the structure or the containment, and the feminine aspect of us and being you, and then also the feminine external is like the content, the creator, that they create life. Maybe look at a house. So it's like the man has quite a powerful, potent role to play within the family dynamic and the community. Hence why we were the warriors. We would, not to say we had some pretty wild Viking female warriors. But I think men that start to become accountable and start to be responsible, like what you said, that's so powerful. It's the most pivotal thing that ever happened to me was when I started to become fully in ownership, accountable, and responsible for my life, is when I shifted from victim mindset to growth mindset. And I stopped going, oh, poor me, life's fucking me over, to like, okay, this is happening for me. It's happening to me, for me, so then I can be better for my family, for my community, for XYZ. And I think, I'd love to see more of that, but like touching on like toxicity and all this sort of attack on masculinity and all this sort of thing, it's almost creating this thread where it's hard for men to step out of that. And now there's this new term of simp or something. I don't even know what it is.
I'm aware. I know it well.
Oh, I started getting called a simp with one of my reels on Facebook, and I'm like, what is a simp? Like,
Yeah.
And maybe in the past I was a bit of a simp, a bit of a nice guy, but if you know my history, like I've been in places that there's not nice men. And all these things, these labels, are creating more suffering than necessary for men that want to heal. Because then what activates, this is something I've been navigating with myself and studying, is shame. It's one of the most elusive emotions men and women can experience, but it's also like an emotion that creates the strongest defense walls. And then it attaches into the addictions, the habits, the patterns that are going to protect you, which then creates like not a good ground or good foundation for healing and transformation.
And my biggest journey that I've been navigating for the past 9 years, 9 years now, is exactly that. It's the shame and what that does to how you show up post that. So my biggest lesson, or my biggest, I wouldn't call it trauma, but my biggest hurt and heartbreak came when my high school girlfriend slept with my best mate. And from that, I I don't think I realized just how much that played out, because I didn't want to admit that it had any power over me. And I didn't want to admit that I was vulnerable to other people's actions, and I was vulnerable to that affecting me on a really deep level. And so what would happen was I would cheat on all my relationships. And because it came from a place of, I don't want to be so vulnerable that I give away I don't want to be so vulnerable that I give you the power to hurt me, which is what all relationships do. Like, if you're in a really hard, you are essentially trusting the other person so deeply that they don't hurt you, right? And I was in this place of like, I am going to use my cheating as a way to protect myself. So even if the worst thing that possibly happens, which is you cheat on me, I'm going to be protected because I've already done that to you. And not from like an attacking you point of view, but more from a shield of like, this protects me from being hurt. And the shame, I think what you mentioned there kind of tweaked something in my mind, which I hadn't thought about, which is, I wonder how much shame I had around someone sleeping with my girlfriend, and the shame of like, oh, another man took my girl, that kind of weird mentality of like, she's mine and another man took her. And just as you said that, I'm like, I wonder if there was a lot of shame that stopped me from actually addressing it. And and what stopped me from addressing it was the shame of, hey man, you didn't measure up against this other guy and he came in and took your girl. And so it's just interesting to see how the shame there's so many layers to it, and how it plays out. And then again, like, because I was hurt, what did I do? I went and hurt a lot of people. I went and hurt the girls that I was dating. I went and hurt friends because I slept with their girlfriends, like just some fucked up stuff. And um it took me a long time to come through that and heal that aspect of myself. And yeah, it was big, but the shame's big, man. It really is.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it was very powerful vulnerability you shared. As I experienced something similar with my first relationship, a lot of cheating, and you just bringing something to my awareness. I was like, oh fuck, yeah, like, there's a protection that happens. Like, if I cheat, then I can't be hurt. Like, I knew she was cheating on me, but I just almost had those rose-colored glasses of like, no, maybe she's not. 8 years, and then we find out. I found 8 years later that she fucked half my friends.
Yeah.
But it's like there was a shame there, and even like you saying, like, we start to hurt others from that place because we don't want to get hurt. So we're like, well, if I hurt others, then it's okay. And this is what I'm seeing. This is what I was definitely seeing when I was doing youth work and doing residential youth work. And when you're doing that sort of work, it's like you're looking after kids that don't have mums and dads, or their mums and dads are junkies, or all that really dysfunctional families. And the way they orientate themselves in life is just like, it's messed up. And have a lot of compassion and empathy for them. And I actually ran into one yesterday. I don't do it anymore, and it was nice seeing him. Looks like he's doing better, but still, just you can sense the density and the heaviness of just that lack of a role model of a father, and even of a female, of a mother that's just absent, neglectful, abandoning. You can just sense just what that does to a youth psyche. And then they expected to step into the world at 18, and, oh yeah, sweet, yeah, you're off, there you go. You're not my responsibility anymore. You're 18 years old, off you fucking go. And it's like, I remember when I was 18, I still was probably 12,
Yeah,
It was like,
same.
I was a tiny little kid, and it's like, I'm going off into the military, to the Navy, and I'm just like, holy shit, like.
And I think what you bring up there is actually a reason why potentially the difference in how we bring up our girls versus how we bring up our boys is, when boys get to about 12, 13, I say high school era, the bravado does come up of like, I've got my shit together. At 13, it
Yeah.
comes up of like, I'm a man and I want to be a man, treat me like a man, but they're still boys. And it's
Oh,
really interesting because I see we tell them, we're like, no, you're not grown up, in like how much freedom we give them, like their curfews and what they're allowed
yeah.
to do. But then we expect them to be men in how they show up in their relationships and how they show up and how they communicate and how. So we have this weird double standard of like, no, you were a boy, you're not going out on a Saturday night, whilst also saying why are you yelling? You're not communicating well and you're doing this and
Yeah.
rah rah.
Yeah.
And then to your point, when they get to 18, because they've had 6 years of this bravado they've put up, we believe like it's this weird thing where we don't believe them, but we do. And so it's like, what's the right word? Double standard of like, you're a
Yeah.
boy, but you're a man. And so when they're 18, it's like, oh, you're a man now, figure it out on your own. And we've had 6 years of you telling us you're a man. And it's like, yeah, but you haven't given them the support necessary because they put the bravado up. And how come you didn't crack through the bravado, see through it? Because you could see through it in some areas, but in these other areas, which were much more important, you believed the bravado. And now he's 18, making a lot more mistakes and not showing up and doing all these things that are still stuck in the boy. Whereas I think with girls, because they don't have the bravado of like, I'm a woman now, they just kind of are a bit more content in being where they're at in their journey. And
Yeah.
we do support them in their journey a lot more because of that. And we say, yeah, okay, here and they're crying and they're doing all these things that boys aren't. They're bottling it up. They're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
addressing what's going on, and they're putting on this masquerade that they're a man, and they're looking to their fathers on how do I act like a man, and they don't see their dads cry, and then they look out into the wider world and they don't see any other men cry, and then they look
Yeah.
into their world and they see women crying and being emotional, and so they go, okay, women are emotional, men aren't. And then we get to 18 and we're like, go be a man, and they're like, this isn't what they're saying, but like on a subconscious level, they're like, oh fuck, I don't know how to be a man.
Yeah.
No one's
Yeah.
taught me. And
Yeah.
or what I've picked up is like potentially the wrong ways to be a man, or unhealthy ways of showing up as it is to be a man.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such a powerful point you just made. It's like this bravadoism, it's even more ripe now with the social media, but it's just so much worse. It's tweaked in this sort of,
Mm.
really unhealthy sort of like, the Eshe lads and all the sort of music, and I used to be like an Eshe lad, not dressed like it, but
Yeah.
be involved in that shit. And it's so not healthy for the psyche. And it's like,
Mm.
a parent needs to be able to give a boy the opportunity to be a boy so they can burn up the boy, right?
Mm.
But if
Mm.
we, like you're saying, is like we, they're trying to trick us and pretend to be the bravado man, and then we, as the father or the mother, get fooled by that.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, sweet, you're a man, off you go. Then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, the boy's 18, he's off there. All he wants to do is cry, but he looks out to
Mm.
the world and men aren't crying.
Yeah. I
And
remember and I remember being 18 and going and finding out that my best mate had slept with my girlfriend, and my mum and my dad checking in on me. And I remember I held a lot of resentment towards them for a long time, of like, why didn't you check up on me more? Like, because they would say, oh, we came in and we asked how you doing, and you said you were fine and that you move on with it, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, because I was an 18-year-old boy not wanting to talk about my emotions. And I held a lot of resentment towards them for not cracking through that bravado and then I had to step out of. Now, as I got older, I was like, well, now you're in the victim mindset of like, why didn't my parents show up for more? It's like, no, they just didn't. You have to love them for where they're at in their journey. They're human, you're human. Forgive yourself, forgive them, and move through it. But again, there was a lot of resentment for a while there of like, why the fuck didn't you show up more and crack through me and realize that I wasn't okay? Like, you're meant to be the parent. I'm not meant to be the one that's more emotionally mature than you are. And so that was, and it was really hard for me to face that and overcome that. But again, it was a place of like, are you going to outsource your power to your parents? How long are you going to outsource your power to your
Mm.
parents? Okay, well, we don't want to do that. And even at 18, you don't want to do that. So you got to forgive yourself and forgive your parents because they were doing the best they could. You
Yeah.
trying to make the argument that your parents don't love you, Dylan? And you're like, well, that's not the argument I'm making. It's like, well, then
Yeah.
they're doing the best they can. Okay,
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
forgive them then.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. It's like, and often like parents of that, our generation, like they just fear confrontation and conflict.
Yeah,
So that you get a couple words out of you. I remember similar thing experience happened to me. You're right. Fine.
yeah,
Fine. That's it. Like,
yeah,
oh, sweet, he's fine. He said he's
yeah,
fine.
yeah,
But
yeah,
sweet, eject. Rather than go tuning into the words and go, oh fuck, he's not fine.
yeah.
And like I want to come back to like what you're talking about around independence and what it means to be chat even further about that, what it means to be independent, because this hyper independence, which is a traumatic response,
Mm-hmm.
we can see that happening in the world. But then there's also that, like, not being independent is like codependence, almost like just complete
Mm,
codependence. But it's almost like this sort of paradoxical where you need to be independent yet codependent at the same time, because
yeah,
you need to be able to outsource to brothers, like-minded brothers, for support, or even women that are wise, powerful elders that can support you
mm,
with deep guidance for you. And I know for me, I have these certain healer women or therapists that I go and see when I'm really fucking in the shit, and they give me really good guidance or support me in whatever way. And then my brothers are for the general sort of like bullshit that you go through. And I think when I grew up, is like I was more of a codependent
mm,
rather than hyper independent. That's kind of how when I grew up, I needed to be around people and a bit of a people pleaser and whatnot. And always trying to make sure everyone was okay and just not meeting my needs. That's how
yeah,
I feel like a lot of drugs and alcohol and a bit of
mm,
bullshit. I would just do things to make people happy because I didn't want to set boundaries. It's because I didn't want to hurt people. And
mm,
that's like I've kind of reframed the people pleaser as it's actually someone who's people pleasing. It's just someone who's on a deeper level is just trying to keep someone safe. It's trying to keep
mm,
someone safe from pain and suffering because they don't want to say no, because
mm,
that will ultimately create an upset with most people, because most people
yeah,
don't like receiving no's. But
yeah,
it's interesting because that's what most of the youth are facing right now is they don't know how to say no. Most of them are
mm,
just saying yes, and they're either falling into hyper independence or into just codependence. Most
yeah.
of them into codependence, I'm sensing.
Yeah, well, I look at it from it's a low. So I kind of look at it through that lens and then go, what's a layer deeper? And I go low self-esteem and I go low confidence. And
Mm,
so for me, I go, okay. And a lot of my work's just reflecting back on my upbringing and a lot of what I experienced and then what my friends experienced and that idea and not being able to say no. Why can you not say no? Well, because I need to belong. I need people to like me. Okay, so you're afraid of standing out of the crowd, or you're not confident enough in yourself to stand alone and say no to people that you love and care for. Okay, so I've spoken about this, I reckon 12 times in the last week in different conversations. Confidence would have to be my number one skill or personality trait that I want to instill in my son, because when you have low confidence, you make poorer decisions, you succumb to peer pressure more, and when you have a high level of confidence in yourself, you feel confident enough saying no, I'm not doing that, because you don't care. Not that you don't care what other people think, it's that you care more about what you think, and that can only come from a place of confidence. If you lack confidence, you care more about what other people think because you
mm,
haven't developed the confidence in your own voice, in your own who you are, and those teenage years, they're the most rockiest time when you are trying to figure out who you are. You're like, I'm so unsure of who I am, where I stand in the world, what do I stand for, who am I trying to become, what kind of man am I trying to become. And
mm.
so and everyone experiences that, and then you couple that with I'm not confident to figure that out, or I'm not confident in who I currently am, you're going to make a lot of bad decisions and poor decisions,
Yeah.
because you need to fit in. So you need to gravitate towards like the next cool thing and people's approval. And that's so waning as a teenager that that's not where you want to be seeking your approval from. And
No.
again, back to the independence conversation that you mentioned, independence is good if they're genuinely independent.
Mhm.
But you know, the question of parental influence might not be so crucial if things were going well with our young. So if our children weren't listening to us or embraced our values as their own, would be acceptable in itself if they were truly self-sufficient, if they were truly self-directed and grounded in themselves, if they had a positive sense of who they are, and if they possessed a clear sense of direction and purpose in life. But we see that so many young children and young adults, those qualities are lacking. And so the independence is actually more an independence from the family unit and a dependence on their friends and a dependence on
Yeah.
their peers. And that's not true independence. And so that's why I'm a bit like, well, what is independence and what are we trying to do here? You know, unprecedented numbers of children and adolescents are now being prescribed medication for depression, anxiety, and a host of other diagnoses. So it's like, are they independent? Or is their independence no longer on family and now a dependence on medication and their friends? And I would
Yeah.
make a really strong argument that the dependence now is on medication and friends. And so we need to bring the dependence back to the family unit and say, hey, I'm receiving guidance, support, and my values from my parents or from good role models. Back to your point earlier around that's why it's so important. Because if I'm getting my values from poor role models or from my peers, they've got no fucking clue what they're doing. They're just like me. They're trying to figure out who they are and what they're doing and
Yeah.
what they stand for and all those sorts of things. So that's why I'm a bit like, ooh, independence would be good if they were confident, if they knew who they were, if they were self-sufficient, like grounded in who they were, and they were able to make good decisions. Great, man. But again, to my point, how do I get my son there, or how do I get young people there? It's through support, through empowerment, through being there, through them depending on me before they depend on an outside influence, which is not a healthy outside influence.
Mhm.
I
Yes.
hope that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And I think like the part that you said, where like so most of them are going into codependence for peers, for drugs, for doctors, for medical,
Mm,
for trends and all that kind of stuff. Probably because it's more than likely is their parents and role models didn't instill self-direction, confidence. And the big word that was coming out for me is having a discernment, having a confidence in your own discernment to make the right decisions, to be able to put boundaries in place. And then kind of like, I'm kind of looking at it. You got over here, you've got like like the codependency and going down the peers. And then you got this way, you've got potentially your flop parents that never really were proper role models because they were trying to deal
mm,
with their own shit and they didn't know how to, didn't have the tools. But then up here, like it's like finding that healthy role model where that you can almost attune to. You're tuning to this person who instills, like yourself and myself, who have put in so much work and money and time into finding the right people to support
mm,
us to then be able to
mm,
embody these qualities. And this is where even still like coming back in, we need to have a bit of confidence to be able to step into that. Because you probably know, and I know is like we work with men, and there's one thing I noticed, the common theme is like it took so much of their confidence and courage just to show up to the first session.
yeah. Yeah.
Like they're like, oh my God, I was thinking about this for 9 months and I'm so glad I'm here today. It's just like,
Yep.
whereas women, it's like, boom, boom, like a week
Yep.
in a
Yep.
session. Oh, sweet, this is great. But for men, it's like a big lead up.
Mm,
And that's probably one of the biggest problems I see at the moment with men healing and transforming is it almost feels like it's taboo for men to do this. It's almost like there's something wrong with men wanting to heal and wanting to transform and wanting to actually become men. It's like the boys who can see it, they start to shame it. Something wrong with
mm,
that. Or you're one of those kind of people where it's like,
yeah.
well, if you came over here and experienced it or started to experience it, and then 2 years' time, you'd be like, wow, why was I not doing that? And I'm sure
Mm,
you and I can probably agree where we've looked at people like 5 years ago or 8 years ago when we were in it and going, nah, we don't need that kind of thing.
yeah. I remember my like example for that is the bookstore at airports. And because I traveled a lot with my family growing up, I would remember every time I'd walk through the airport, if someone was near the self-help section in the bookstore, I would be pissed. Like, I would be like, what a fucking loser. Like, fucking hell, get your life together, mate. You're looking for books for guidance? Like, Jesus, you must suck at life. Like, real judgmental. And I remember that vividly, like, multiple times. That was like consistent. That was my thing that stands out for me. Um, in that resistance to doing the work and working yourself, because you think you know it all
Yeah,
and you
yeah,
think you can do it alone. And again, like, it's funny, the theme, like, this independence is really pushed on us to like stand alone and you have all the answers. And then we're surprised that men don't want to do the work, because in order to do the work, you have to admit to yourself, I don't have all the answers.
yeah. I
And
don't know.
men, I don't know. And a lot of men, just saying that is really difficult to say, oh, I don't have an answer, and to go to someone else for those answers. It's really difficult because you're a man. You're meant to have all the answers. You're meant to know what you're doing with your life. You're meant to stand up and stand strong and be this fucking king, you know? And it's like, man, like a true embodiment of a king is looking to the advisors and looking to his queen and looking to
Yes,
people and, hey,
yes.
I actually don't know. Can you help me here? Like, help me make this decision. Help me get better. Let me learn from these areas, these gaps in my knowledge. And we really, yeah, we really struggle to come to that place because our egos are blocking us.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the most powerful place to be, is not knowing. And
Mm,
this is I think this Buddha writes there's a quote about it. I can't get it off the top of my head, but it's basically like the deepest state of our human and spiritualness is not
mm,
knowing.
mm,
And then from that place of not knowing, well, we know everything, but it's not in the
mm,
sense of this sort of like not knowing. It's wild. It's just like, you don't have to really think about it. And that's what blew me open, was I struggled to be wrong,
mm,
just to be
mm.
okay with being wrong. And that was one of the biggest sort of challenges in my own relationship, was, trying to justify when I was actually wrong. She's calling
Mm.
me out, and then here's
Yep.
me just trying to justify. I justify? And now it's
Yeah.
like she'll say something. It's like a piercing truth spear
Mm.
through my heart. And then I'm like, oh, I'm like, yeah, oh, yeah, that was, thank you.
Yeah.
And it's
Mm.
hard because we've got to have an open heart to be able to receive
Yeah.
and I love the TV show Vikings, so all those like sort of Viking warrior women, like, you got to be able to take one of those fierce spears to the fucking heart from our women or the queen.
Yeah.
You have to be able to be open for it. You
Yep.
can't try
Yeah.
and do the same thing back and shield it, because you're going to miss
Mm.
the wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's painful. It sucks.
And that, the point that you bring up around holding your mates accountable and being held accountable, in all the movements that we've seen over the last 10, 15 years, there's been such a heavy emphasis on, like, hold your mates accountable, hold the men in your life accountable. When you see bad behavior, call it out, and all this sort of stuff. But no one's this is what irks me, and this is what gets me, is this fucking high road that some people take on just do the right thing and just do this. And you have to come at it from a level of empathy and understanding and say it, and you have to give credit where credit's due, and you have to accept things for what they are, and you have to say, actually, that is what you should do, yes, but do you know how fucking hard that is to do? Is to, like, hold your friend accountable to poor behavior or something that they've done. Because you know what my friend does when I hold him accountable is he turns around and he goes, fuck you, Dylan. What about when you did this? And he's
Yeah.
got he's got 5 rounds ready to go where I fucked up. And
Yeah.
then so what we do is we go, the mentality isn't this, oh, I don't want to call out bad behavior. The mentality is, I'm not a perfect human, so who am I to call someone else out on their imperfections? And
Yeah.
that's the mentality that a lot of people have. And I think it takes what you mentioned of, like, I need to be really open to criticism and I need to be really open to having my shit called out in order to call other people out. And I need to be completely okay. Like, even if I get called out on my shit in the wrong manner, I need to be confident enough to hold that and say, thank you for calling me out. I will work on that. However, that doesn't excuse your poor behavior. Or, mate, can you call me out when I'm doing it so that I can change? Because that's what I want from this friendship, you know. And saying and having that ability to be confident to call out a friend and say, hey, man, you know, why'd you just wolf whistle? Simple things. Why'd you wolf whistle that girl? Like, that was fucking. Why'd you grab her on the bum? Hey, mate, that's not fucking okay. Oh, Dylan, mate, just last week you sniffed that girl's hair, and you know, and go like, fuck, man, actually, you're right, I did. Thanks for calling me out on that. Can you call me on that in the moment? And then automatically you've disarmed the conversation and you're saying thank you to your mate for calling you out. And what's he going to turn around and then say and go, you've disarmed him and now the argument's not there and it's not an attack. You're saying thank you for calling me out. Can you call me out sooner? Oh yeah, oh fucking all right, mate. Like, you think you're so good, and so it's like, no, man, I make mistakes, like I do, but I'm also your friend, and a sign of a good friend is someone who doesn't let you do stupid shit and doesn't let you live in your bullshit. And so, do you want me to be a good friend? No, I don't. Okay, brother, we'll pick this conversation up when you're a bit, you know, tomorrow morning or whatever, you know. But I think that, you know, thank you for calling me out, but I'm going to call you out on your shit. And that's how you do it. So now we've educated people on how to do it. Now they've got some framework that they can work with and practically implement into their lives versus just the mentality of like, call your mates out. And it's like, would you know how hard that is? Like, that's a difficult thing to do, is to call people out on their shit, because who likes being called out on their shit? Very few people. You know, it takes a lot of work to be okay with being called out. And so I'm really passionate about that too. It's like, can we educate? Can we educate and not shame? Can we actually give practical advice?
I think it's the power. This is like one of the, you know, this is something actually Jaguar shared with, like, the calling out. And he's big on this one. And that's the beautiful thing about our friendship, is we call each other out. And some of the other brothers that I'm friends with, is we call each other out on our bullshit. And it's probably the most powerful thing that I've ever quite experienced is, you know, it's like you're saying, it's easy for men to turn around and turn into the warrior and go, well, you did this, this, and this. And then they're bitter and resentful, and they're coming back at you when this man's coming to you is bringing you something. It's actually bringing you a gift.
Yeah,
but we turn around and think there's a shield and a sword for us to have to fight against. And this is the thing, is like, I think this is a big step about moving to be able to be called out, is when you're in the growth mindset and you're not in the victim mindset. Because if you're in the victim mindset, you're just going to try and defend it, palm it off. Rather, if you're in a growth mindset, and this is the big leap, when you can get into, you know, majority, it doesn't mean the victim mindset doesn't try and come up, but you don't let it drive the ship, or drive the car, or drive you. And it's this growth mindset. It's able to receive being called out, but then also being able to call one of your brothers out. Because then this comes back to what we're talking about, like, you know, people pleasing, even like you might not want to call a brother out, even though you can see this shitty behavior and their life's going downhill, because you don't want to hurt them, you don't want to upset them, you don't want to cause more pain because you're calling them out. But it's actually going to cause the right kind of pain, the right kind of initiation and suffering for them to go, fuck, yeah, okay, sinking 6 beers and smoking 3 cones every night isn't self-care, you know?
And it's this is such a timely point, because I'm going through it right now with one of my real fucking good mates, and it's gotten to the point now where I'm frustrated, but I'm more frustrated at myself for not calling out the behavior early and not for calling him out earlier. And because now it's like, mate, anyway, so it's really timely in what you're talking about, in like, call your friends out from a place of love and giving them that gift, because you're now withholding something from them and you're allowing them to sink further and further into their own shit. And instead of going, man, I love you, and because I love you, here's what I'm calling you out on. And that comes from love, brother. And I want you to, and we've done a disservice to each other in this friendship by not holding ourselves, not holding each other accountable to a higher standard. So I take responsibility for that too. I take responsibility for not calling you out. And I would love it, dude, if you called me out, because I know that there's been shit that we don't hold each other accountable to, because it's funny, or because, you know, whatever it is, because we love each other, right? And it's also a difficult thing to do, because sometimes your mates need your support and they don't need to be called out. And
Yes.
using your own discernment of like, okay, my brother just needs support right now, and maybe in a week's time when he's like built himself just a little bit off rock bottom, then he'll be okay with a challenge. But
Yeah.
right now, I just need to support him. So it's also the discernment of like, you don't want to kick your mate when he's like, the first time he makes a mistake or the first time a pattern emerges, like it's the first thing, and you
No, of
come
course
down
not.
hard and you go, mate, I'm just trying to hold you accountable. It's like, dude, I actually fucking need some love right now.
Yeah,
I'm
Thor's hammer comes
struggling.
down.
Yeah. So there's also the discernment between when do you give love and when do you challenge. And the challenge is still from a place of love, as you said, and as I said, but there, you don't want to fucking challenge someone when what they really need is support in that moment.
Yeah, and that's key. It's like discernment between, do they need support or do they need tough love? Is it love or
Yeah.
tough love? And
Yeah.
I think a big part of being able to call out one of your brothers is the loving communication of that. Go, I love this container, and I want to bring this to the container because I feel like it will serve us both if I bring this. And are you willing to receive it? Almost,
Yeah.
depending on how.
Asking for permission's a really good point. Like, hey,
Mm,
brother, do you mind if I call you out on something right now?
yeah. Or
Can,
I'm
can I call you
noticing
out on something?
something.
I'm noticing something and I'd like to bring it to your attention because maybe you've got a blind spot here. And if your mate says, nah, mate, not right now, and you go, okay, can I think it's really important. Can I call you out when you're feeling a bit better, like on
Yeah,
Saturday or Sunday? Can we
yeah,
go for coffee and have a real good combo? Like, I think I'm noticing something and I'd like to bring it to your attention. And it comes from love. And if your mate's like, nah, mate, I'm good. Then the conversation starts to shift of like, okay, mate, like why are you, what's going on? Why are you afraid of what I've got to say, or what's coming up for you when I'm talking about this right now? Oh, mate, and then he's going to say something else like, fuck, what do you know? Like, fuck
yeah, yeah,
you, whatever. And then you can navigate it like from like, oh, he's really fucking hurting. Again, like
yeah,
compassion,
yeah,
empathy.
yeah.
Here's a boy who's hurting, and you come at it from that place instead of, again, you get up your sword and shield. I love that analogy.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
you go to war with your brother, and it's like,
yeah.
that's not fucking going to do anything.
No, it's not. It does
Yeah.
nothing. It makes it worse.
Yeah.
He's got more
And
wounds.
I think too, something that comes to mind when I look at calling out behavior and challenging your mates in shows like Vikings and in shows like I'm watching Sons of Anarchy at the moment, like gangs and brotherhoods and all these sorts of things where men are men together. Sometimes it's funny, and sometimes there's an act of violence. Like you're like, mate, you need to fucking wake up now. And there's like a wrestle or a punch
Yeah,
on, and
yeah,
almost always in these shows, almost always post the punch on, post that act of violence and that wrestle that's contained, and there's the other brothers watching. They get up, they hug it out, they say thank you, okay, I've heard your message, and they walk
yeah,
away.
yeah.
And so it is also interesting that we've domesticated ourselves as men a bit, which is
Yes,
interesting. And
yes.
I don't know I'm not saying go and beat the shit out of your brothers when you have an issue, but like there is also something to be said around where have we lost the fire, the warrior archetype in our lives that actually really serves us and serves a really healthy purpose in our lives? Like where have we lost contact to that?
So,
And
well,
and
I
I find
feel
that
I
really
was gonna,
interesting.
yeah, I was gonna bring that up before. Like, one thing I've noticed, my wife, just third pregnancy, she's really building a community of mothers around her and starting to do this. And it's like mothers or females and women haven't exactly, they haven't lost the capacity for one of their main role, just birthing, being the mother sort of archetype. Whereas men,
Mm,
it's like we've lost that sort of ancient tribal sort of part of ourselves where we go out together, whether it's in nature, we get together, we fuck around, we wrestle, we hunt,
mm,
we fight, we laugh, we call each other out. And we've lost that. And like you said, we've been domesticated and we've been emasculated, we've been humiliated, we've been shamed, and we've been put into, you could go to the whole office 9 to 5, tradies doing the 9 to 5, then to the pub, and just doing these sort of, it's giving the false sense of providing, the false sense of doing things. But when you
mm,
really bring it back, it's like we don't have that brotherhood there. It's
mm,
not, it's an unhealthy brotherhood. It's not like that sort of, and this is what I like so much about like when you look at gangs and prison and even military, is like there's one aspect that I've noticed from experiencing that is there's a brotherhood there. It might not be
Yeah.
healthy, it might
Yeah.
not be aligned to the sacred
Yeah.
per se, even though it is an aspect of the sacred experiencing itself, but it's still got that brotherhood sort of stuff going on where you do get called out. And yeah,
And they've got initiation processes, right? Like, why have gangs become so prevalent with boys in particular? For thousands of years, we all lived in tribes with boys undergoing initiation rituals into manhood that were delivered by the men and elders of the tribe.
yes,
Now the rituals have disappeared, but the desire to be initiated, that primal need to be initiated, hasn't disappeared. And so young boys turn to gangs to initiate themselves into manhood. Like, what's the most common? And not that I fucking know. Maybe you might know, but maybe one of the common ones that you see, like through stories and in Hollywood and documentaries, it's like you have to kill someone to get into a gang, right? And that's an initiation into the gang. Is like you have to go and do something, and now you're a part of this. And young boys who are lost without good role models, without men in their lives, really flock to that. Why? Because it's still primal. It's still a part of our DNA of like, I need to belong to something bigger than myself. And when society doesn't provide healthy example, this is also why sport's so important, because
yeah,
sport provides a healthy outlet of a tribe, of a team, that boys can come together and have healthy examples of it. But again, how can we ritualize some aspects of sport? You know, how can we bring some like, great, you're fucking stepping into manhood and you're going down the right path.
yeah. It's an interesting one because it's like it's already in place in the sort of society, but it doesn't go to that next level.
No.
And there are obviously me and you can see that it is going to the next level, but
Yeah.
it's not mainstream in the sense that it's like sports teams. That's a really, really good one, I think. Sports, because I'm a surfer. It's like you've got surfers and stuff, and like it's an independent sport, but there's a brotherhood.
Yeah.
Some of the groups are unhealthy. Some of the groups are very healthy, and they support each other and they're healing and growing. And it's interesting one because that just coming back to like men, it's just that rite of passage. It's just so missing. And I think for the most powerful rites of passage a man can go through at this point in time is becoming a father in this day and age. It's like I think you're not going to get anything more powerful than the idea that you're going to be the guide of another soul, and you're either going to miss the initiation completely or you're going to honor it fully.
Yeah.
And I think that's why there's an attack on the family unit, because the family unit is probably the one thing that is holding a huge amount of light, or a huge amount of love and kindness and potential for change on this planet, is the family unit. And I think this probably hours from having your boy.
Seriously, I gotta, babe, you good?
Yeah, it's like you said that, I was like, shit.
Yeah.
So like for you, it's like you're going to go through all of this soon, and all I can say, it's the most beautiful experience you'll ever go through. Most testing, most beautiful experience, and I'm about to go through it for the third time. And I never thought I'd be a father. I was almost like that. I never want to be a dad. Never want to be a dad. And my wife was like, and she's like, why? You'd be a great dad. I'm like, no, I can't. No, this and that. And then it just kicked into gear, and it was like, game on. And I went ham on the self-discovery, ham on
Nice.
the transforming. And that's not to say I didn't fall on my face 1,000 times, which you and I both know it's part of the journey.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, it's like coming back to the point you were saying about just initiation. It's just missing, isn't it?
It is big.
Just missing. Cool. It sounds like we're coming to a wrap.
Mate, that was great. Solid hour 10 convo, it seems. Good convo.
That was beautiful, man. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It was
Of course.
And just how promptly, like straight away, like, fuck yeah, let's fucking do it. And I feel like quite of an alignment with your soul and yourself and your perspective, and just your orientation of wanting to support men. It's just love what you do, and I'm glad there's men like yourself out there supporting the youth, because it's definitely something that is needed, is more men looking after the youth rather than just the men. Like, the youth is the generation that's going to support change. So love your work, brother.
Thank you, brother. Right back at you.
So you just want to just say where people can find you?
Yeah. So big on Instagram at Dylan.Roos, DYLAN.ROOS. And then my website, DylanRoosCoaching.com.
Thank you. I'll put that in the description anyway. So if anyone wants to check out Dylan, this beautiful man, check the description or hit his tag that he just expressed. So thanks for coming on, brother. It was
Thank you, brother.
Pleasure.